Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Sarah and I like to talk about books, and for better or worse, 2024 has come and gone. I have read some of the best books in 2024, and I've also read some of the most completely insane, absurd books I couldn't have ever even dreamed of. And I have a good reason as to why so many of those books were read in 2024. I do think, to be totally fair, if some of these books had come up in my algorithm authentically, I would have had so many questions that I probably would have ended up reading them irregardless of any specific goals that I had for 2024. However, there was a very specific reason as to why I read so many absurd books last year, and I do want to provide that context before getting into my best and worst books of the year, because I think it's warranted. It played a really large part in my reading for this last year. If you're at all active over on TikTok, or if you were in the last year and a half, you may have been aware of this movement, but there was a creator over there, Aaron Hattemer, who had paired up with Operation Olive Branch, and essentially what they did was made it really, really easy for creators to sign up to sponsor a specific family in need over in Palestine. And so I had signed up through this program and was paired with a family that I am still in contact with. I am still helping them fundraise as needed. It's Shahed and her family. She's got younger brothers and her parents that she's fundraising for so that they can get all of the things that they need in order to survive. If you go to literally any of the link trees in my bios, you'll still see the access links to any of their GoFundMes or fundraisers that they have. So if you're at all interested in continuing to help support them, please go and check those out. But the algorithm works in mysterious ways, and one of the things that the algorithm over on TikTok especially really likes is absurdity and insanity and things that people want to just comment and be like, how does this even exist? And so I specifically sought out and found books that would fit that criteria and intertwined that in my fundraising for this family so that they could eventually meet some of their fundraising goals. Those goals are now ongoing still because of how expensive it is just to be there right now. But for a time, at least, it was a really, really effective way to help fundraise. And so I read whatever insane thing I could get my hands on. So while these books may be on my worst reads list, they ended up having a really good impact. So I don't think that necessarily makes them good books, but I do think it makes them worth talking about still. Hence why I'm doing this video the way I am. I am going to talk about my best reads of the year. There were some absolutely phenomenal books that I read this year, but I'm going to sandwich in between some of the insanity. And I would also just like to point out that my best of books are going to be in a general order, but I really do think that these books could change position day to day. All of them were 5-star reads for me. I think all of them will be staying with me for a very long time. I don't think there's any here that I wouldn't recommend to most people. And I'm actually going to start with my very last read of 2024. This is why I don't put lists like this out until January, because I do some of my best reading in December. The last book that I read of 2024 is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. I cannot believe it took me 30 years of life to pick up any sort of James Baldwin work. I'm really glad I started with Giovanni's Room though, because I absolutely love this story. Because this was read so recently for me, that's why I'm talking about this one first, just because I do think that there could be a little bit of recency bias with this one. However, I don't see it leaving my brain anytime soon. This book is just, it's tragic and it's beautiful and it's fleeting, and I can't get the conversation, David and Giovanni's first conversation at the bar together, out of my mind, because as I was reading it in the moment, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so incredibly charming but tragic, because from the beginning you know how this story is going to end. But their first interaction, again, just so charming, so endearing, but also so good a summary of everything that's going to go wrong. I am planning on doing a reread of this in 2024 because my first read of this was via audiobook. I got a free audiobook through the PRH Audio Influencer Program, and I'm so glad because the audiobook was exceptionally well done. but I knew I needed to pick up a copy of this specifically for that first interaction, because as I was listening to it, I was just like, I literally needed to sit down to process. So I'm going to annotate this book in 2025. I'm really, really looking forward to it. And I'm also already planning on my next James Baldwin reads. So this is kicking off what I think is going to be a really excellent reading year for me. I cannot recommend this enough if you too have somehow gone your entire lives without reading this one. Also, can we talk about this cover real quick, because it's stunning. Buford Delaney did an excellent job with the artwork on this cover. Okay, now moving on to one of the worst books that I read this year, and this one actually wasn't through any sort of fundraising or efforts to read anything insane. I really did think I was going to love this book as I was going into it, but it is Done and Dusted by Lyla Sage. Now, I will say I do like most brothers best friends romance tropes. However, there's one specifically that always bothers me, and that is when the brother acts out in like a complete and utter temper tantrum when he finds out that his best friend is with his sister. That bothers me every time, and it especially bothers me when they act out in violence when they find this information out. It's surprisingly common, and this book had that. It's ginger ale, by the way. The brother in this instance is Gus Ryder. He brought his best friend Luke Brooks into his family early on into their childhood and has always treated him like a brother. And Luke does have some like bad boy moments of his past, but nothing that justifies the sheer anger that Gus has when he finds out that his sister and his best friend are together. When August Ryder finds out that his little sister Clementine is dating Luke Brooks, his best friend, he literally acts out so violently. He punches his best friend in the face and just essentially calls him trash. Says he's just like his dad, which is like a devastating blow. He knows exactly what kind of arrow he's shooting with that barb. And because of this temper tantrum that August throws, Clementine and Luke decide to like not see each other for a couple weeks. They're not fighting. They're just not seeing each other for a while so that her brother can calm down. And I really don't understand why anyone cares about this man's feelings, because he wasn't even around enough for his sister to find out like what was wrong, why she returned home so suddenly and like was acting completely different. He really did not concern himself with her whatsoever. And the way that he reacts to Luke when he finds out that Luke is dating his sister is so rude and mean and violent, and we don't really see their friendship outside of this. So like I just am not really convinced that he likes Luke at all. I don't know why we care about Gus's feelings. I can't believe after this entire book and his entire behavior in Done and Dusted, August Ryder then got his own book. For me, I was like, okay, I'm going to read it, but he's so severely on my list that he's going to need to apologize significantly and often. So, more on that later. Back to my best of books list. 2024 was the year that I started to get into poetry specifically via audiobook. And let me tell you, if you're somebody who struggles with poetry normally, get an audiobook of a poetry collection and let the poet say those poems to you in your ears. It makes a huge difference when you can pick up the cadency, the beats, the pacing, the pauses that they're intending. The meaning just like to me just started jumping off the page, off my headphones. I don't know. You get what I'm saying. It was a phenomenal experience, and it also like just that process in general introduced me to one of my favorite authors now, and that is Tay Tibble, specifically her poetry collection, Rangikura. The way that she describes femininity, her indigenous ancestry, mythology, and colonialism, and just weaves them all together was so deeply personal, but also just incredibly cool. Every time I think of this collection, I specifically think of the moment where she says, "Aren't you infatuated with the nerve they had to think of me and make it happen?" in speaking about her ancestors. And it's just the way she builds to that moment, and everything that comes before it and everything that comes after it is just so incredibly powerful. I'm obsessed with it. I simply could not love this collection anymore. I think her other collection, Pocahontas, is also absolutely worth the read, but that specific moment stands out so severely for me that this book is making my best of books list. The next book on my worst books list is Can I Tell You Something by Holly June Smith. This probably isn't a surprise to you if you saw my 12 Days of Holiday Novellas video covering this book, because I talked pretty in depth about how much I didn't like it. This is essentially Secondhand Embarrassment, the book. Our main character, Hannah, is completely obsessed with this man online who does smutty voiceover work. He then shows up to her holiday vacation house with her brother because, surprise, he and her brother are roommates. She literally already considers this man hers because of his online persona and how much she knows about him, and he considers her not like other listeners. So this is the epitome of a parasocial relationship, and I could not help but cringe through the entire thing. Back to the best. This is one that I actually don't have a physical copy of. I don't even know if they sell physical copies of this one because I think it's an Amazon original exclusive, and that is The Six Deaths of the Saint by Alex E. Haro. 30 pages. The depth that this book is able to accomplish in just 30 pages is one of the most impressive things I've ever had the pleasure of reading. This is a story of a peasant girl who is sought out by the king to become his knight, and she uses the power and the guidance of this mysterious saint in order to bring this king more power and glory. But there is little known to her about who or what this saint is. And honestly, that's all you really need to know before getting into this book. It's well worth your time. It'll take maybe an hour, and it's an incredible story. I bet you'll never guess the book that's on my list next. Lost and Lassoed by Lyla Sage. I am an August Rider hater through and through. That was my entire review on Goodreads for this book, because guess what? I still hated it. And honestly, this book just made me hate him more. The fact that then he just got to keep being mean to Teddy in this book, and everyone just gave him a pass because, like, oh, but he's so nice and such a good dad to his daughter, when, like, that's the bare minimum. That's the bare minimum. I'm not gonna spoil it here, but I don't like the way he treats Teddy at all. He continues to not be as apologetic as I think he needs to be for the events that happened in the first book. And I really don't think he gets dragged enough for that. Maybe if there were more books in between, like the first book and his book, maybe he would have had more time for me to come around to him. But I really, really don't like August Rider. Okay, and then back to my best of books list. I finally, in 2024, gave Wuthering Heights the time and attention that it truly deserves, and I am completely and thoroughly obsessed. Every single character within this absolutely miserable story is insufferable, and yet at the same time I was completely enthralled and very invested in absolutely everything that happened. That is such an incredible balance to strike. Emily Bronte, I am so impressed. I think my review for this book was literally just absolutely miserable. I loved it, and I did. One of the most surprising things to me was just how funny, like, there were so many funny moments within this story, and it was mainly just because these characters, they did not care to be liked, so they would just say insane things to each other, and it caught me off guard, and it was funny. But then we have Catherine and Heathcliff's relationship with each other, which is just showing this dark and twisted love that burns too hot and takes too much and will literally take absolutely anyone and everything that gets too close down with it. At this point, the Bronte sisters are just taking up a lot of room on my favorite books list of all time, because Charlotte Bronte is already on there. It was about damn time for Emily Bronte to get there too. Gonna have to wrap things up with the third sister, I think, this year, and maybe see if we can go 3 for 3. And back to the worst. This does start the insanity. This is where things start to get really weird. This is Morning Glory Milking Farm by C.M. Nacosta. And it only gets weirder from here.
So I did it. Who's surprised? I read Morning Glory Milking Farm because in the comments of my last video, which I will link below, you guys all said that it was actually pretty good, and I will give it to you in comparison to Dinosaur. This one, not so bad. However, we still need to talk. Violet is a broke college graduate who just needs some money to pay her bills, so she gets a job as a milking technician at the Morning Glory milking farm. And as a milking technician, it is her job to stimulate a speedy collection from their Minotaur clients, as this pharmaceutical company pays Minotaurs for their essences to then put in human male enhancement pills. So I'm thinking like, okay, cool, we're normalizing sex work. That's great, except for the fact that this book on multiple occasions is very adamant that this is not sex work. It justifies this not being sex work by saying Violet and her coworkers, they don't get anything out of this. They just need a job. They also say this can't be sex work because this pharmaceutical company is just commodifying us. Sexual commodification is literally sex work. Even goes on to say towards the end of the book, like, even these minotaurs are just looking for another paycheck, so like, can't be sex work. So this could have been a really creative way to normalize sex work, and instead it seemed a little anti-sex worker. That's my biggest issue with this book, but I also just think this book would have been better if it was like a fated mate situation, because the way Violet was acting was actually insane. Because at 41% of the way into this book, Violet is walking through neighborhoods trying to figure out what this man's house looks like. She's using the initials on his medical chart, trying to figure out like what common Minotaur names are to see if she can figure out his name. She's literally thinking about having this Minotaur's babies, and the only interactions they've had are quick 15-minute HR approved handy sessions. Thankfully, Rourke suffers from a similar level of insanity, so these two are able to live happily ever after. However, I have to now live with the knowledge of Rourke and the 24 ounces coming from his particularly corpulent eel. And now so do you. And if you for some reason need to feel better about watching this video, you can go to the link in my profile. I am trying to help Shahed and her family reach their GoFundMe goals. They are less than $10,000 away from their goal. I would really, really appreciate your guys' support in sharing their story and donating if you can.
Whew. Next. Back to the Best. Against the Loveless World by Susan Abuwala. The voice of Nahir, our main character in this story, is just so distinct and incredible and unapologetic. I did not want to put this book down for a single second. Nahir starts this story in the beginning in solitary confinement, and so from solitary confinement, she's telling us her story as a Palestinian refugee and how she came to be in confinement. This is a fictional story, but it relies in a lot of truth that a lot of Palestinians face. It doesn't shy away from the dark details of being a Palestinian woman in the Middle East in the middle of political unrest. But this book also shows the humanity and culture that's just at the heart of it all. Again, this book is just completely unapologetic, and through the poverty, through the violence, through the unrest, it still has just such a strong grip on hopefulness. It's incredible. Back to the insanity. Tyrannosaurus Sext, featuring an additional book that was 9.5 velociraptors. Now, I had several questions when I was initially presented with Tyrannosaurus Sext by Lola Faust. Because to sext, one must first have the ability to text. What kind of phone accommodations are needed for an animal to be able to text when they're notorious for their big head and little arms? Can a T-Rex take a selfie, or is this kind of like a Mormon soaker situation where you have to get a friend involved? I had these questions and so many more, and absolutely none of them were answered by me reading this book, because it turns out it's only 9 pages of them just kind of hooking up. That was it. They're just banging. I don't know why I expected anything further than that. I must warn you, on Kindle Unlimited, after those 9 pages of Tyrannosaurus, it immediately leads you into another entirely different book called 9.5 Velociraptors. And this book, it felt like the prequel to Triceratops and Bottoms. On that at a later date when I can fully process it. But in the meantime, if you could go to the link in my profile and go to that very first link, which is the GoFundMe for Shahed and her family, go ahead and donate whatever you can. I'd appreciate it greatly. Yeah, we moved on to dinosaur. That's actually where this started. That's where we're going. It's just a taste. It's gonna get so much worse. And this book, I do not have a physical copy of yet, but I will be writing that wrong so soon. It is A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston. If you've ever wanted to just put yourself in the middle of your favorite standalone romance series, right in the middle of that town, so that you can fully experience all of these people, you could become their friends, you could watch them fall in love in real time, and you could just totally intertwine yourself into the story so that you can just surround yourself with it, you are going to love this story. At this point, I think Ashley Poston is maybe my favorite modern romance writer. She just keeps giving me exactly what I want, and I love the way that she sprinkles in just a little perfect amount of whimsical magic into all of her stories. This book definitely has that. In A Novel Love Story, our main character, Eileen, accidentally stumbles into the small town that is featured in her favorite romance series, a series that was sadly never finished because the author died unexpectedly. And I'm not going to give away what happens to her in this town, but she starts to fall for one of the men there. But there's this pull of, I'm falling for this man, but he's not real because these characters aren't real, because I know that this is a made-up story. This book is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I love it so much. And again, Ashley Poston giving me magical whimsy and sad romance. That's my perfect combination. Perfection. But now we have to go back. We have to go back to the scene of the crime, the scene of where it all started. Triceratops and bottoms.
I regret to inform you that not only does this book exist, but that I read it. Now, Kindle Unlimited has been known to throw some absolutely bonkers books my way, but I saw this cover and this title, Triceratops and Bottoms, and what do you mean? What do you mean? Essentially, this woman, Erin, is from the future and she's just really bored. So she signs up to be a volunteer to be like the guinea pig for this new time travel machine that takes you back to the Jurassic period. And when I say really bored, I mean really bored and really horny, which leads me to the first quote that made me go, what in the Sarah J? She goes back in time, right, to the Jurassic period. And listen, I'm used to, when we get into these books, maybe like inanimate objects with sentience, or like shifter animals, or at the bare minimum, animals that communicate as humans. This was not that. They are just regular schmegular dinosaurs going about their dinosaur business. There's a name for that, babes. And keep in mind that this character is testing out new time travel technology. They are recording her and her adventures in the Jurassic period. Okay, so she has one encounter with a dinosaur. She comes back, and then it is mentioned she goes back multiple times. She is warned. It says she's warned that she's not allowed to do that anymore. And she continues to do it until the point that she is banned. She is banned from using time travel machine because she keeps dinosaurs. So I'm thinking, great, that's the end. The dinosaurs are safe and she's banned. And maybe we need to consider some sort of rehab process for her. But no, a billionaire comes in at the end and is like, I see the sexy things that you're doing and I want to do them with you. So the billionaire secures the technology for them both to go back to the Jurassic period and do more things with dinosaurs together. So what did we learn from this? We learned that billionaires are bad. We knew this. And we also learned that maybe it's a good thing that we don't have time travel technology. If you would like to help restore my faith in humanity, you can click the link in my profile.
Yeah, I also hate to inform you that unfortunately over 1 million people saw me talk about dinosaur erotica there. So, back to the best. My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't pick up this book for the longest time, and I do think it is for this one main reason. This book is historical fiction. It follows two friends through the entirety of their lives. And I didn't understand why this historical fiction book needed to consist of this 350-page book plus 3 more 450-page books each. Why? Why do we need that much? And not lying to you. After 80 pages of this book, I still didn't understand. I was having a good time. It was a good story so far, but I was like, I don't see where this is going and why we would need that much detail. And then Elena Ferrante told me to shut up, because every single detail she put in the beginning of this story built such a perfect foundation for the themes and patterns of poverty and class and generational trauma and inheritance and so many more things. It put such a perfect foundation down, and we started seeing these themes just jump off the page. It was immaculate. I'm working on a dedicated video for my brilliant friend. I'm trying to get my thoughts down on this book before I start book 2, which is incredibly hard because this book actually ends on a cliffhanger. Elena, why would you do that to me? Why would you do that to me? But again, like I said, we have these two friends that are growing up with each other in post-war Naples. They're growing up in poverty, and each of them are really intelligent and just trying to grasp onto the education that they can get with both hands and hold on for as long as they possibly can, because both families kind of want to take these girls out of school so that they can start working and helping the family. And because of that, both of these girls end up going in different directions, but staying very close friends and relying on each other very thoroughly throughout their friendship. And they push each other further and help further their education just by being kind of in competition with each other, but also supporting each other. Just these continued themes of class, violence, and poverty and their impact throughout the generations was flying off the page. I cannot wait to get into book 2. So if you're at all interested in that, again, I'm going to make a dedicated video for this series. So subscribe if you're interested, and then you won't miss that video. And now we go back. To where? Just really the bits of it. This one is Stuffed by Sylvia Morrow, a living pillow romance. She never thought she'd be able to find a lover, but he's been in her bed for years. She never thought that she'd be able to find a lover, but he's been in her bed for years. I read Stuffed, a living pillow romance by Sylvia Morrow as part of my Smut for Justice series. Annie loves anime and hates any form of human contact, so she has never really had any sort of relationship, but she does have a very special relationship with her favorite pillow. Pillow doesn't have a name, but he does have sentience because lore. Essentially, at one point in time, a phoenix loved a goose, and the goose got cooked, so the phoenix set itself on fire, as they tend to do, but a singular feather survived that fire and got mingled in with the goose feathers, and now we're stuck with a sentient pillow. This pillow has vampiric tendencies and needs to suck the life out of other living things in order to remain sentient and have power to shift his pillow form. The pillow has been living off of the bugs in Annie's apartment, which is just enough to allow him to remain sentient and also keep him nice and firm so that he can stay Annie's favorite pillow. However, opportunity arises when one of Annie's creepy coworkers forces himself into her apartment and makes the mistake of touching the pillow. He completely drains this man's life. Annie has no idea what's going on. This man just shriveled up and died in front of her. Pillow now has enough power to explain that he's her favorite pillow, he's absolutely in love with her, and he wants her to create him in her perfect image. Annie is totally into this and bases him off of her favorite anime butler. I didn't know what this means, so I just googled anime body pillow just for kind of a reference, and instead I got a body pillow with Danny DeVito, so we're gonna go with that. Finally names Pillow. His name is Ori because apparently that sounds like the French word for pillow.
Oreiller.
Sure. The life-sucking vampire Pillow has to then explain that he has to continue to suck the life out of living things in order to keep his now perfect form, but lucky for him, Anne just happens to have a shit list of people who she doesn't mind him snacking on, and form his more intimate bits while hooking up. At one point in time, there are tentacles who end up getting there happily ever after Ori completely drains the scummy landlord of his life. Understand, I've read a slew of unhinged stories, particularly as part of this Smut for Justice series, but no other story has kicked off my fight or flight instincts quite like this one has. Ori has such intense feelings for Annie, and she has no clue who this pillow is. He was apparently on board for this intensity, but it made me want to launch myself into space. However, if I never read this story, I never would have found this Danny DeVito body pillow, so for that, I'm eternally grateful. So be eternally grateful if you followed the link in my profile to Shahed and her family's GoFundMe campaign. They are less than $4,000 away from their total GoFundMe goal, so I know we can get them there in no time. Yeah, that one's rough. That one's really rough. Back to the best. Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan LaFano, edited by Carmen Maria Machado. If Carmen Maria Machado puts her name on it, I will be reading it every single time. And I love her purpose, her intent for writing this story, for taking back the narrative of the, sapphic queer monster and flipping it. Because, LaFano wrote this gothic horror about a sapphic vampire named Carmilla, and the story is told through the Vampire Diaries. The story is told through the vampire diaries of her victim. Carmen Maria Machado then uses the introduction and the footnotes to flip the script on LaFano and say, okay, you had a found narration of these diary pages. I'm going to say you left some stuff out, as, most people typically do when they're trying to paint queerness as monstrous. Carmen Maria Machado shines a light on that specific angle and also says there's more to this story. Specifically taking hold of this story and saying, I found more pages and you left some stuff out. Carmen Maria Machado's edits are aimed directly at LaFano and shaming him. And the cherry on top are all of the footnotes. This is petty retribution, and I could not love it more. Now back to the worst. How many more of these do we have? Okay, now back to the worst. There's only two more worst books, and then we're almost through it. I'm going to include these two together. Spooned and Knifed by Ruth Cardello. These are books 2 and 3 in a series. It starts with Forked, and this series is essentially, think Captain America, but they get turned into silverware. The first book isn't on this list because Forked actually showed some promise in that it had like a plot line that seemed like it was going to go somewhere kind of fun, but Spooned and Knifed unfortunately just felt really rushed and not very well thought out, and like nothing really happens except for these women find their fated mates by getting weird with silverware. And I read that, unfortunately, but that's not the worst of the worst. We'll get there shortly. Okay. We're getting really up there. James by Percival Everette. This book I feel like was on every must-read list this year, and for a really good reason. I followed suit. I read it, and it was incredible. In this book, we have the character James from The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Percival Everette takes that character and gives him his own fully fleshed out story. If it's been a while, like it was for me, since you've read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, Jim is the character within the story that is a slave who finds out that he's going to be sold off and separated from his family. So he runs so that he then has a chance to come back and reconcile with his family and hopefully free everyone. This book gives him a fully fleshed out backstory and kind of fills in the gaps that we don't see in Huckleberry Finn. This is the first book that I've ever read by Percival Everette, and I was just really impressed with the writing because, I mean, you're treading through some really heavy topics in this book, and the entire time you're still seeing all this like hope and love and humor. There was like a lot of funny moments in this that are surprising. It's a surprising balance to strike that I was really impressed with. I was also really, really loving the way that dialect was played out in this story, the way that it was told in this story, because not only did it show how intelligent Jim was, but you could also tell immediately who Jim was speaking to, who he thought was around, and how much he trusted each person that he was talking to and interacting with by how he was speaking. And I specifically listened to the audiobook for this one first, and then started following along with the physical copy because I knew I was going to want to annotate it. And I think the audiobook did an excellent job showing that specific theme within this story, but I just absolutely loved how that was done. I'm actually, for 2025, I am planning on doing a reread of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn because it has been probably about a decade since I've read that book. And I really want to like refresh my mind on the like original source for this book. I think it'll give me a deeper appreciation for what Percival Everette did in this book by refreshing my memory on what happened in Huckleberry Finn. So more to come on that in 2025. Okay, I have 2 more favorites books and 1 more worst of book. I'm going to go through my second to last favorite book, and then we can do the best of and the worst of back to back. Okay, so the next on my best list is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This book, as you can tell, is relatively short, but there's so much packed into these few pages. It's, I think, less than 200 pages. In the story, we have this group of 40 women who are imprisoned within a bunker together, and they are so heavily monitored by these guards that their entire existence is just completely limited. Everyone within this bunker are grown women except for this one child who is our narrator. They don't even give her a name, they just call her Child, and she is who we're hearing from in this story. She is so young at the start of the story that she does not remember any sort of existence outside of the bunker. So this book explains her and all of these other women's lives within the bunker, and also their escape from the bunker and what they find outside, and everything that happens when they realize that everything outside of the bunker is just as desolate and isolated as inside the bunker. The women within this story spend a lot of time focusing on trying to answer all of these questions that they have about why they were in the bunker in the first place and like what this world is that they find themselves in. And Hartman doesn't really bother with answering any of those questions because she's more focused on just what the impact on humanity is when you strip away all of the context, all of like the social context, and just in general, the context of everything that's happened before and everything that could possibly happen after. I loved everything that this book was able to accomplish within 200 pages. And I also just love how towards the end of the story, like as the reader, you're kind of like brought into the experience yourself. I think it was incredible. Now for the worst of the worst. Wet, hot Allosaurus summer. I'm gonna let my previous review speak for itself. Wet Hot Allosaurus Summer boasts of hot dinosaur action the way you like it, so if you like it traumatizing, this is absolutely the book for you. This story is set in a society where scientists were able to extract dinosaur DNA from rocks, and instead of going the Jurassic Park route, they decided to incorporate dinosaurs into the labor force because this too is a capitalistic hellscape. In their infancy, dinosaurs are chipped with a device that allows them to communicate telepathically with humans via touch. Tanis is an 18-year-old girl who works on her father's farm, and she's always been obsessed with dinosaurs from a distance, as well as having some other really questionable interests. Has anyone checked on the horses? One night, Tanis runs into a dinosaur at her father's barn, and she knows before they even communicate that they have something special. He doesn't know if he'd rather eat her or mate with her, and she notes that he smells like fish and has hot barbecue breath. 2 neck licks into their initial encounter, and Tanis and the dinosaur are interrupted by her father and his rifle, and without hesitating for a moment, he fires at the dinosaur, and Tanis, ready to risk it all, jumps in front of the dinosaur and takes a bullet in her shoulder. Dinosaur picks her up and runs with his quick lizard legs. And then we learn that his name is Big Al. You would think that those quick lizard legs would be rushing to get her medical attention, but no. Instead, they are on their way to a human dinosaur sanctuary, and on their way, he licks her wound, and that does it for both of them, so they end up hooking up in a field instead. After they are intimate, Big Al admits rather bashfully that he really enjoyed the taste of her, so she looks down at her now gray, wounded arm and offers it up to him as a little treat. He eats her arm off. They finally get to the human dinosaur sanctuary. A redheaded woman comes out to greet them, and Big Al immediately runs up to her. They know each other, clearly. He strips her naked, and they run off into the bushes together. Tanis, in her grief, is led into the sanctuary and accepts the ritual to be initiated into the dinosaur sex cult. turns out that the next day, Big Al's supposed to go through a mating ceremony with that redheaded woman, and on his way into the sanctuary, he locks eyes with Tanis and goes, "I'm so sorry, I didn't realize we were a bonded pair, didn't realize we were mates." She literally let him eat her arm, and he immediately ran off with somebody else, but she was like, "You know what, that's fine, let's run out of here together." And they did. They escaped the dinosaur sex cult together. And that is still not where this book ends. There were several moments throughout this book where I was convinced Tanis was just not going to make it, either by continuing to just offer herself to Big Al limb by limb because she very clearly enjoyed it the first time around, or that maybe Big Al was just going to lean into his instincts and just eat her up like a savory little tortilla. But staying true to the romance genre, Tanis and Big Al do get their happily ever after, where they get to live out their days in the vacant farmhouse that's owned by their very accommodating boss over at the slaughterhouse. And they even get their very own little owl. Thank you to everyone who voted for me to read Wet Hot Allosaurus Summer as part of my Smut for Justice series. At the moment, Shahed and her family are only $5,900 away from their GoFundMe goal. Once we get them to $4,000 away from their goal, I will pick up another book. So leave me a comment below on what book you think I should read next. Here's some of my thoughts. I have a hard time believing I'll ever read anything that is more unhinged than Wet Hot Allosaurus Summer. That's literally impossible. I don't think I'll ever read anything that's more insane than Wet Hot Allosaurus Summer. That was traumatizing. That book was traumatizing. He ate her arm. And then he left. Okay, so now we're left with my best book of 2024. And I know we've gone through a lot of really absurd bad books, but this is one of those very, very special, absurd, excellent books. This is Shark Heart by Emily Habeck. This is just about everything I've ever loved about any book combined into one. It is simultaneously sentimental and absurd. In Shark Heart, we find out that this newlywed couple is experiencing their first year of marriage, and it's going to be their last year of marriage. We have Ren and Lewis gets this medical diagnosis that he is painfully and slowly within the year going to be turning into a great white shark. At the end of this diagnosis, at the end of the year of marriage, they will need to be releasing him into the ocean, and they will be separated forever. Lewis will retain most of his memories and human brain, but he will be living out his days alone as a shark. I would like to emphasize that this is one of the most beautiful love stories that I have ever read, and it is absolutely not a romance. This is not going to follow your normal romance genre conventions. It is sad. It is very sad. The first part of this book is mainly focused on Ren and Lewis's marriage and Lewis going through this transition. And then towards the second part of the story, we still get some snippets from Lewis living out his days as a shark, but then we also get some background on Ren and her very complicated relationship that she has with her mother. Ren's past, present, and future are all shaped through these various animal shape-shifting diseases in a way that is both hopeful and devastating. As someone who has read their fair share of shifter romances, I love that this book takes that so seriously and says, but what if? What if that was real? What if that was real? That would be devastating. I love how this book took that kind of transition seriously and also used it to explore how devastating it can be to love someone who can't fully show up for you in the way that you wish that they could, or the way that you need them to. More of this, please. This is Emily Habeck's debut novel. I will be eagerly awaiting any and everything that she decides to do going forward, because this was incredible. So that's it. That's everything. That is the very best and the very, very worst of 2024. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you're still here watching this video, obviously my previous years, I have dedicated more time to making TikToks, and that is shifting over, I think, to BookTube this year. So I'm looking forward to that a lot. And if you're looking forward to that as well, you can subscribe to this channel like this video. Maybe leave a comment below of what your favorite book of this year was. If you've read any of these books, if you've read any of these crazy books, please comment below and let me know that I'm not the only one that has read these insane books. And my book recommendations now are just insane. So maybe I'll continue to review books like that. I don't know. I do have fun with like a sentient object romance. These ones I just really did not enjoy. So again, thank you so much for being here today. I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful day. Mwah.